Hello everyone, I'm Secular Spirit, and in this video, I'm going to ask you all a question that carries within it a bold claim. Why does atheism terrify religious people? Beyond this bold claim, I'm also going to be bold in asserting that I know the answer. And this answer is part of the foundational framework that keeps organized religion alive today. And it also explains why it will likely endure in some shape or form as long as there's humans somewhere out there in the universe. I'll explain. If there's one thing I've gained from getting involved in the, pardon the religious reference, in the hell of social media, it's that it's allowed me to engage with a lot of religious people from many faiths. And this engagement, despite sadly being often negative and even just downright hostile, has allowed me to better understand the mindset of religious people. It's also allowed me to reflect on my own mindset when I was a Muslim. When I asked religious people why they're religious, I got all sorts of answers, but I've condensed them down to these four general themes. Some will say I had a personal spiritual experience that revealed the truth of my faith. Some rely on logic and claim things like something can't come from nothing, so the God of my religion has to be real. Some will admit I've never really thought about why I'm religious. I was just born and raised into it, and it's been part of my identity my whole life. And then there's others who won't even necessarily admit that their religion is true. They'll just say something along the lines of, it comforts me, it helps me make sense of life. At the same time, their explanations often carry within them a dismissiveness or criticism of atheism. For example, they'll say atheism doesn't logically make sense, or they'll say that being an atheist makes life empty and meaningless, thus the religion is true. Others will take it a step further. They'll point to the atrocities of self-avowed atheists like Joseph Stalin or Cambodia's Pol Pot, claiming that the reason they orchestrated the deaths of millions was because of their atheism. This could be a subject for a separate video, but there's simply no way you can link the lack of belief in a god to those men's actions in the same way you can link something like the honor killing of women to Islam, or the condemnation of condoms in countries of major AIDS crises to Christianity. This claim is also leveled at the more minor actions of an individual. If they don't believe in God and divine consequences for their actions, what's to stop that individual from going around killing, raping, stealing, and more if they can just get away with it? In this way, atheists are perceived as a threat to society. People who believe in nothing are capable of doing anything, or so the argument goes. In this anecdote I've shared previously on the channel, a Muslim acquaintance of mine once told me that if you don't believe in an afterlife, there's no difference between you and a dog that's seeking the gratification of its primal needs. This atheism thus jeopardizes everyone, especially vulnerable children who many religious parents want to educate in their respective faiths before they're indoctrinated into the evils of atheism. Following this mode of thinking, atheists are just lost souls, willingly or unwittingly doing the bidding of the forces of evil, minions of the Satan of Christianity, for example. Now, if someone has powerful faith within them, it seems like it wouldn't make sense that they'd be threatened by atheism. And to that point, there clearly are many religious people who leave atheists alone and they respect their lack of faith, even if they believe that this lack of faith will condemn them to hell. But then there's others who have a lot of hostility towards atheism, especially towards prominent atheists like Richard Dawkins. My next question is this: what is behind all this aggression and hostility? Why is atheism perceived as a threat? Well, in my opinion, the simple answer is fear. Fear, after all, is the cornerstone of religious faith. On the surface level, you can point to fear of the punishments of hell in a religion like Islam, the threats of demons and Satan, etc. But fear works in other ways to keep people believing. For the rest of this video, I'll explore two of these main fears. Let's start by delving into the fear of the unknown. Now, I've divided this fear into two closely related fears. First off is the fear of death. It's that feeling when we're walking across the street at an intersection and a car whizzes by, almost hitting us. It's that nauseous, uneasy feeling when we're standing at the edge of a cliff or the top of a tall building and we look at the ground far below us. The vast majority of us don't want to die. We come with this hardwired survival instinct. In moments of danger, our adrenaline levels skyrocket to aid us in that survival. Death is the enemy, and it's not just because of the pain that may accompany that death. It's the mystery that death carries with it. The question of what happens to us afterwards. Do we cease to exist? Does any semblance of us remain after death? Can anyone return from the dead? Will we ever see deceased loved ones ever again, or is that it? This leads us to the fear of meaninglessness. Following the logic of an atheist who perhaps doesn't believe there's an afterlife, and who believes that once we're dead, all that we were, our consciousness, our feelings of love and hate, our likes and dislikes are gone. Some religious people will look at life as this brief, pointless thing, filled with more good things than bad things if they're lucky, and then no more. If that's all there is to life, if there's nothing beyond our existence here, no God or divine energy with specific plans for each of us, then do our goals as individuals and as a human race matter? If all human beings are going to be gone one day, does anything we're doing right now in this very moment matter whatsoever? Why get up in the morning? Why be kind to a neighbor? Why fall in love? When all of it will be meaningless and forgotten, and thus worthless. This is a key reason why atheism is so terrifying. Letting go of belief in a God and religion means letting go of the promise of an afterlife, the promise of a divine plan, of ultimate meaning to everything about us in the universe. Instead, the formerly religious person is left with mysteries, big I don't knows to answer many of life's big questions. They're left to confront the possibility that there is no core intrinsic meaning to our lives, or our existence in general. And they'll also mourn for a second time their deceased loved ones who they'll never hold again. And they'll even mourn for themselves. Once they go, they're gone. And if they're unlucky enough to suffer for something like a terminal disease, they'll mourn that they'll never exist without that disease. And once you cope with that, then there's the question of what to do with this life that's the one thing you now know you have for sure. Do I follow the teachings of flawed humans like myself, when I can see the negative consequences of our actions all the time, in wars, in racism, in the oppressions of capitalism, and so on and so forth? Do I have children when this life is just a brief flicker in an abyss? Why resist the temptation to steal from my boss if I can get away with it? Why not cheat on my spouse if they'll never know? Speaking personally, I dealt with these fears and questions when I stopped being Muslim. The struggle was that Islam was such a big, important part of my identity and worldview that I didn't really know who I was or what I believed without it. I was struggling to even figure out why I should bother living for a long time. And once I decided that I did want to live, I struggled to piece together what to do with my life. But here's the thing with these fears. They're a glass half empty perspective on the whole situation. Here's a glass half full outlook that I now carry within me. We're alive. Who knows why exactly? But the why doesn't necessarily matter because we are here. So we might as well make the most of our lives. While life has its mysteries and it could all end at any moment, the happiness that we all feel is real to us and thus it matters to us. And the suffering we feel is real too. Our connections with other people and their happiness and suffering are real as well. In that sense, I don't think we need the motivation of a divine creator or a 24/7 party afterlife for our souls to care about those connections and our own happiness and suffering. When I see a crying lost child or if I break my leg, I don't think, well, we all die and cease to exist, so who cares? I deal with those issues or I don't, and my decisions will have consequences either way. And sure, there are problems in the world, and our man-made attempts to address them are often not very successful. But we are the only ones around with the power to solve our own problems, and we have successfully solved many of those problems. Horrid diseases like smallpox are largely a thing of the past, for example. I don't view life as a gift per se, but it is something that I treasure and value, even with the acceptance that I will lose everything I gain in it. After all, losing something eventually doesn't mean it has no value in the meantime. As for meaninglessness, let's go back to when I referred to a so-called argument by religious people that atheists are capable of doing anything because they believe in nothing. Well, first of all, no human can believe in nothing. The worst human being, even an atheist for that matter, has things they care for, values that matter to them, even if it's only their own well-being. And you can also turn this argument around. With the power of faith behind you, you can justify anything, as we have seen throughout human history, the Spanish Inquisition of the 15th century and the recent atrocities of ISIS, just two of many examples. Without a religion backing you up, you have to justify your actions to yourself and others using the only real basis we can, the impacts on yourself and your fellow human beings. This frees us to make mistakes, learn and try to improve as individuals and as a species, instead of locking us into religious dogma. When we realize that there's nothing we're supposed to do as ordained by divine power, we're given the freedom to explore and figure out what we want to do. And contrary to the incredibly cynical view of humanity by some religious people, that doesn't mean automatically that we're all going to go around doing terrible things. There will be many of us who do terrible things, but many of us will also do caring, wonderful things that help ourselves, yes, but also help others. And pause to think here about what might cause those of us who do terrible things to do them in the first place. And you might see that those causes are often man-made ones that we can address. A child born into a life of crime who becomes a hardened criminal and perhaps a murderer, if given the career and educational opportunities, the safety and respect of an alternate life, would that same person end up the same way? And now we go to our second and last fear, the fear of exclusion, or you could call it FOMO, the fear of missing out. Now this fear doesn't extend to every religious person, but it does when religion, and to be very specific, active religious adherence is an integral part of their family and community life. As our hypothetical religious person said in the beginning of this video, I've never really thought about why I'm religious. I was just born and raised into it, and it's been part of my identity in my whole life. This means the core beliefs, the prayers, the rituals, festivals, remembrances, and the family and social gatherings that they entail are intertwined with their sense of self, of what they're supposed to do in life. That's why there's a lot of people who don't actually believe their religion is true, but they practice it anyway because they don't want to miss out on all those social benefits that they gain from participating. Think of religious communities like the Mormons or Mennonites, or of religions like Islam, where you can be ostracized from your family and from your community, where you can lose your job and even get killed for leaving, as is sometimes the case with Islam. And you'll see there's all sorts of added incentives to remain a believer. If you start questioning your religion and whether you believe in it or not, the FOMO can and often does hold you back from actually taking that step of leaving, simply because it's just so much easier to stay a believer. You keep your sense of identity. You don't risk losing your loved ones and potentially your life. You might not even like aspects of your religion or its viewpoints on things like what happens to disbelievers or homosexuality, but you stay silent, or you even convince yourself that you agree with those viewpoints just so you don't rock the boat and jeopardize yourself, spiritually and or physically. For those people who rationalize their enduring belief built on this fear, which is totally understandable because of all they risk to lose, I'd almost compare it to the condition of living in a police state ruled by a ruthless dictator. Do you stand out by denouncing this dictator and the horrors they perpetrate? Or do you suffer in silence because then at least you'll be safe and you'll have your loved ones? It's not a trivial question. If we're being honest with ourselves, most of us would remain silent in such a police state scenario. This speaks to the power and hold that religion has over us, even to someone like me who lives in the freedom of a country like Canada. One of the struggles I have to this very day is that it's so challenging for me to have meaningful, deep connections with people from my Palestinian, or more broadly, from my Arab background, because there's just often such a wide gulf in our worldviews and our values, since they practice their religion to varying degrees, and I simply don't believe. This is also why I've largely given up on having a romantic relationship with someone from my background, because even though we have a lot of shared heritage and a lot of shared experiences, it often comes down to a difference in values. I avoid my religious relatives, which is a luxury many ex-religious people don't have. And I don't participate in things like the Ramadan iftars or the celebrations of Eid. Missing out on these things has had major consequences on me that I can't fully quantify or explain, but I feel them nonetheless. But here's what I gain. I can be myself without anywhere near as much compromise, and I free myself to find people who do share my values and who I can have meaningful connections with. It just won't be as easy, take it from me. Of course, again, I have the luxury to be able to safely do this. Many formerly religious people do not, and I'd never recommend doing anything that jeopardizes their safety. And to go back to those who stay religious due to FOMO, and perhaps they even have FOMO of missing out on paradise with their loved ones. I'd like to make another comparison. Following organized religion is almost like being in the Matrix, being aware of it but choosing to reset themselves like the character Cypher from the first Matrix movie, if you're a fan. You try to erase that awareness and compromise yourself to go with the ignorance is bliss option. Life outside the Matrix isn't pleasant. It forces you to confront many uncomfortable realities, but those are the realities beyond faith. To conclude this video, I just want to say that I don't blame religious people for having these fears that I've discussed in this video, of wanting to stay blissfully unaware of the realities underpinning the Matrix. I'd say they are universal fears shared by most human beings, whether they're religious or not. What I hope viewers take from this video is a sense of how these fears can lead us to make choices and take actions that harm others and ourselves, and for some of us to question whether those choices and our actions are justified. If we ever want to end the horrible things that happen in this Matrix, in this world dominated by religion, we first have to unplug ourselves and acknowledge that those horrible things are real, that we can fight them and be rid of them. We don't have to live with the bad things just because, we're afraid of losing the good things. And the bad things might not even be that bad if we just change our perspectives. And that's all from me. Thank you as always for watching, and please like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Until next time, I'm Secular Spirit, and I'll be back with another video soon.